Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. Good to be with you. We'll begin as we usually do with a little bit of practice, and then we'll dive into the talk and meditation. So to begin, check in with your body. Attune to your body and in particular your posture, straightening up, allowing your spine to become erect, and settling in. Allow your body to relax. And with a straight spine and a relaxed body, allow your awareness to move towards your breath. Feel your breath, especially at the abdominal area. Pay attention to what it's like to feel your breathing right now. Both what the sensations themselves are like, sensations associated with the inhale, the exhale, but also the quality of the mind that pays attention to the breath. Perhaps you're happy or sad, focused or distracted. Use the exercise of noticing the sensations associated with breathing as a kind of mirror for noticing the quality of your mind right now. There's no wrong answer. It's okay if your mind is distracted or there are difficult emotions or some other challenge that's present. If, as you attend to the sensations of breathing, you're aware of that, then you're succeeding. Even if you notice it's hard to notice what it's like for you right now, that is itself being aware of what it's like to be you right now. It's a simple exercise to follow the breath, to notice the breath from moment to moment. But if, as we attend to the breath, we also are aware of the state of our own minds, can become increasingly fascinating. Simply stay with the breath from moment to moment while maintaining an awareness of your state of mind. If at any time you become distracted, losing track of your breathing or the state of your mind, good news, you've noticed you're distracted. That's becoming aware of your state of mind. Notice that and return, staying with the breath from moment to moment with an awareness of your state of mind. That state of mind might include knowing what kinds of things you're thinking about, being aware of what you're feeling emotionally, noticing whether there's a tendency towards focus or towards distraction, things like this. Again, let the breath be a kind of mirror for noticing your state of mind right now. And as we come to the close of this meditation, take a moment to make a sort of snapshot. Ask yourself, reflecting on this time of practice, overall, in general, was my mind tending towards thinking, or was my mind quiet, tending towards not thinking? Answer that question honestly for yourself. It's not bad or wrong if there was a tendency towards thinking. It's probably the case for most of us. It's useful to be aware of that, and we'll make some use of that in the practice later. So just make a snapshot, saying my mind was tending towards thinking or towards quiet. Okay, very good. It's good to be with you all. Nice to see some old friends and some new friends. Uh, for those of you that don't know, I'm Tasshin. I helped found Oak a few years ago and was teaching out here last summer, and I've returned for a few months to help here at Oak. Um, and Ryushin is still here, but he was accidentally double booked today, so he asked me to step in conveniently my first week here. So I'm really grateful to be with you all, and Ryushin will be returning next week, and then sometime soon you'll see me again. So before we dive into the talk and some further practice, we'll take a moment to introduce ourselves as a group. We'll say our names, we'll introduce ourselves, and then also a quality that we're hoping to cultivate today. So maybe it's calm or focus or joy or gratitude, some quality that we'd like to cultivate through our practice today. So I'm Tasshin, and I would like to cultivate faith. And we'll go here. There's several folks here at Oak in California, and then we'll go to you all that are joining us online. So
I'm Anna, and I'm...
Speak a little louder.
Oh.
Michael,
Okay, I'm Anna. I'm cultivating full body well-being.
I'm Keller, and I'm cultivating patience.
And 1 second. I'm Sky, and I am cultivating gratitude.
My name is Zev, and I'm cultivating calm.
Hi, I'm Koshin, and I'm cultivating peace.
And we'll go to Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee. I'm cultivating calm, bright awareness.
Thank you, Renee. On to you, Rich.
Hi, everyone. Cultivating alertness.
Great. Thank you, Rich. How about you, Jeff?
Hey everybody, I'm Jeff, and I'm cultivating as soft-heartedness.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. How about you, Kathleen?
Hello, I am cultivating grounded kindness.
Ooh, sounds good. Thank you, Kathleen. How about you, John?
Hello, my name is John, and I am cultivating trust.
Great. Thank you, John. How about you, Gergely?
Hi, I'm Gergely, and I'm hoping to cultivate motivation.
Awesome. Thanks, Gergely. Morgan.
I'm Morgan. I am cultivating love.
Thank you. Lynn?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn, and I am cultivating generosity and joy.
Thank you. How about you, Sandra?
Hi, I'm Sandra. I'm cultivating self-compassion.
One of my favorites. How about you, Jenna?
Hi, I'm Jenna, and I'm cultivating inner peace.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. And Pam to finish it off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pam, and I'm cultivating insight.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Well, these are all wonderful qualities to cultivate. It's inspiring just to hear what you're aiming to cultivate, and gives me a sense of what brought you here today and what you're looking for. The practices that we're doing may or may not be aimed at the specific thing that you mentioned, but I hope it will cover at least some of them, and you're always welcome to keep practicing after we finish our meeting if there's a practice that feels interesting to you that would be helpful to explore the specific quality that you're working with. And of course, actually, during the guided practices, you're always welcome to do any technique you like, really. You don't necessarily have to do the technique that's offered. Often when I come to these things myself, my own interest in my own practice is in a different place than what's being discussed on the day. So I'll continue with a practice that's relevant and interesting to me at that time and still benefit from being in connection with others who are doing the practice, from hearing words about the teachings. So I invite you to do that if there's a practice that's particularly interesting to you, to explore anything that you like. I mentioned that for myself, I'm hoping to cultivate faith. A different way to put that is the way that I believe Gerge put it, which is motivation. It's a good answer, a good quality to cultivate. Zev picked me up from the airport a few days ago when I flew out here. It's very kind of him, and we were catching up in the car when we were driving to Oak. Oak is in a new place than when it was when I was last here, and so a lot's changed externally, and certainly a lot had changed for both of us, so there's many things to catch up on. And as we were talking, I realized that in the last week, I had slept in 5 different states. I had slept in New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Illinois, and then that night I would be sleeping in California. I've been traveling quite a bit, taking care of my family. My family has had some issues that I've needed to attend to, and then I've been traveling a little bit besides that. And then when I flew out here, my plane, it was in 2 legs. It had to make kind of an emergency landing in Michigan, and then I missed my connecting flight, so they put me up in a hotel in Illinois on the way to San Francisco. So very strange itinerary to get here, to be here with you today. And frankly, the sort of change of scenery externally, being in so many different places in such a short time, has been disorienting for me. It's been disorienting. And so as I've arrived here at Oak, I've had this sort of persistent feeling of being disoriented. What is this place, and what am I doing here? It's as if I'm in a strange novel and I've lost track of the plot because so many things are happening and I don't quite understand exactly what the story is going towards. It's disorienting to be disoriented in this way. So that sense of disorientation has had me reflecting, what exactly am I doing here, and why am I doing it? Why practice? Why dedicate oneself to practice? This is a question each of us can ask ourselves. Why am I here? What did I come for today? Why am I doing the practice? Why do I meditate? And in my experience, having a clear answer to this, it may or may not be explicit verbally, but having a clear sense of motivation of why we're practicing is extremely helpful when practicing. It's easier to do an exercise like following the breath if you know why you're doing it. If you don't know why you're doing it, then it may seem banal or uninteresting or a waste of time. But if you know, oh, this is why I'm practicing, it makes sense. Then you practice and you can throw yourself in fully to doing that because you have a sense, oh yes, this is why I'm doing it. So I've had a little chance to reflect on this question of why practice? What is this all about anyway? And of course, I invite you to consider this question for yourself as well. Probably what brings you to practice will be different than what brought me to practice, why I'm practicing. Why you're practicing today might be different than why you're practicing, why you practiced yesterday, or why you'll practice tomorrow. It changes, of course. And this, I think, actually is probably part of this disorientation that I've been experiencing, because some of the old stories that I've been motivated by just don't make as much sense anymore. They're out of date, shall we say. Things are changing in my life, in the world, and so things change. And so have to come to a new answer for why I practice. It still makes sense to practice. It's one of the things I'm most excited about, but the stories that I used to have about why I practice are in need of revision, shall we say. But I'll share a little bit about my sense of why I'm practicing, why I think it's worth practicing, why that makes sense. And of course, I invite you to fill that in with your own sense of why practice. Well, it begins with, as far as I can tell, noticing that we're here. Noticing that we're here. We're alive, we're breathing, we're living, and we're in this world, this planet, this earth. And it's sort of strange, if you take a moment to reflect on it, that we are alive. It's not something that seems necessary or that's determined, that there should be a universe, that there should be an earth, that there should be conscious beings living, playing, dancing, breathing on that earth. It's miraculous when we stop to think about it, that there is anything at all and that we are alive to witness it. So we can get in this place of noticing, wow, there's something here rather than nothing. And I'm here, and I'm aware that we're here. And there's a kind of awe, or wonder, curiosity, sense of mystery that comes with that. Noticing there didn't need to be anything, and yet there is something. I didn't need to be here, and yet I am. And even within that wonder, there can be an accompanying horror, kind of horror. So we look closely at what this life entails. There is, in fact, wonder and mystery that we're alive, and yet there's also a horror. This life presents challenges, many challenges. It's not easy. It's not perfect. It's quite hard. And these challenges come in different forms for different people at different times, and yet there are some commonalities. All of our bodies, for example, are subject to aging, sickness, and death. Some of us here are older, some are younger, and yet we're all subject to aging. Probably some of us are healthy and some of us are sick, but we're all subject to sickness. And while we're all alive now we will all one day die. Comes with the deal. Just comes with it. We age, we get sick, and we die. And moreover, everyone that we know and everyone that we love is subject to these same things. The people that we love age. People that we love get sick. And the people that we love die. It's just part of the deal. You can't have life without death. And at different points in our lives, we notice this. This is just part of the equation. And that can produce a kind of horror. An overwhelming horror. Of course, this might take different shapes at different times. Different things might occasion this kind of existential horror. But it's common for many of us, especially those of us that seek out these kinds of teachings or practices. Something in our lives happens and we notice. As wonderful as it is to be alive, as mysterious and miraculous, there's also something that's not quite right here. Something strange. For the Buddha, it was going out for a drive with his charioteer and noticing for the first time that people were subject to aging, to sickness and death, the things that we've talked about. And although he had lived an extremely privileged life with many different luxuries, everything that he needed taken care of, he had a beautiful wife and a child, still, it was horrifying to notice that there were people that were subject to aging, sickness, and death, and indeed that he also was subject to these things, that no one could escape. That was horrifying for him. Perhaps for you in your own life, you may have had a moment or moments like these, and probably it takes a different shape. Maybe it was going for a walk in the fall and noticing the leaves turning. Maybe it's a family member that gets sick. Maybe it's watching the color of our change, the texture of our skin. At some point, we notice in some way what we might call dukkha, or suffering, or dissatisfactoriness. Noticing that dukkha might be associated with noticing aging or sickness or death, but it might be associated with something else entirely. Be it speaking to someone and realizing that what we do matters, that our speech has consequences, for example, or the way that we conduct ourselves has consequences. And we realize, oh no, I've lived my whole life until this moment with the false belief that what I did didn't matter. And yet it does. It mattered then and it matters now. It will continue to matter. We can realize that the way that we've conducted ourselves, the way that we've spoken or carried our bodies, or even the thoughts that we've had in our minds, wasn't appropriate. We thought it was, and yet it wasn't. We'd been unintentionally hurting people, and yet hurting them nonetheless. Maybe that's the kind of realization you might have where you realize, oh no, there's suffering. Kind of realization that produces this horror, And that horror, as terrible as it can be, has a kind of calm or relief associated with it. Because we're acknowledging the way that things are. For example, it is just true that you and I are going to die. That's just true. It's not a truth that we always like to talk about or that's frequently spoken about, but it's true. I will die and you will die. Maybe you'll die before I do, or maybe I'll die before you will, but we'll both die. It's just true. And if we ignore that truth or fight that truth, then that perpetuates this kind of suffering. It makes it worse than it needs to be. There's a kind of relief or freedom or calm that comes with simply acknowledging what's true. But unfortunately, it can stop there. It can stop there. We can be left with just this horror. I know of at least 2 branches of Western philosophy that take this as their basis, where they agree and acknowledge something similar to what Buddhism acknowledges, where they say, yes, there is suffering. There are this kind of horror. They talk about it in different ways than Buddhism does, but they basically acknowledge this suffering. And yet that's the end for these 2 branches of philosophy that I'm thinking of. They basically stew or steep themselves in noticing this horror. And that's a difficult place to be in. It's, I would say, better than ignoring or fighting this truth. But if you're just there without a way out, that's a challenge. If you're in a pit, it's better to know that you're in a pit than to not know that you're in a pit. But ideally, you're in and have a way to get out of the pit. That's the ideal case. And fortunately, the Buddhist teachings claim that there is, in fact, a way out of the pit. We need to acknowledge this horror. We need to acknowledge the suffering. But there is a way out. The Buddha found a way out and he shared it so that we might learn about it, so that we might find it for ourselves. And of course, other mystical traditions talk about this as well. There are other techniques and teachings that are of enormous benefit. But this is the basis of Buddhism, noticing that there is suffering, that there is dissatisfactoriness, facing this horror as I've described it, and from there, offering a way out. Liberation, enlightenment. There are many reasons to practice meditation. We might want to be a little less stressed, be more relaxed. We might want to be able to focus more easily. It can help us with our work, with our relationships. All of these things are good and beneficial, wholesome and commendable. But traditionally, the reason to practice meditation was so that we could escape. It's a tool for those that have noticed that they're in a pit and want to get out. It's a tool for those who have noticed that we're subject to old age, sickness, and death, and want to find an escape from that. It's a tool for people who realize that they're in a prison and want to break free. There are many different ways that we can notice this, that we're in a prison, that we're in a pit, that there is suffering. Probably the ways that you've noticed it are different than the ways that I've noticed it. And yet Buddhism claims that for all of us, there is a way out. And meditation is a part, not the whole, but a part of how we escape. And to the extent that we take these kinds of metaphors seriously, that they resonate with us, strange as they are and perhaps uncomfortable as they are, then we're grateful. We're grateful to have a way out of a pit, to have a way out of a prison. It's a relief and a joy, something to. In the same way that there didn't need to be a universe, that we didn't need to be alive or aware that we are alive and that there is a universe. It wasn't necessary that there would be a way out, that there would be an escape. And yet, thankfully, Buddhism claims that there is such an escape and gives us the way out. Meditation is part of that way out. It's why we practice. We practice so that we can have a mind that is capable of escaping the prison, capable of walking out of the pit. And as sort of dark and somber as these metaphors are, it can be fun. Meditation can actually be a tremendous amount of fun. And paradoxically, the more you are aware that you're in a pit, the more aware you are that you're in a prison, the more fun the meditation is, the more engaging or fulfilling or satisfying it is. Because it's a form of joy that doesn't dig us deeper into the pit, that doesn't further entomb us in a prison. We know as we practice that we're learning how to get out. It can take a while for meditation to become fun. It can take years, in fact. That's the bad news. It can take a little while. For some of you, perhaps it won't take very long. You'll be perhaps more skilled than I was, but for me, it took me a few years to really consistently have fun in my meditation practice. But I think that sense of fun, how to put this? One important ingredient of that sense of fun is that it feels good in the body. Often when we sit, it's uncomfortable. There are pains, physical and emotional. Our mind is distracted. It can be frustrating to follow the breath, things like this, or whatever technique we're doing. But if the body feels good when you meditate, which is possible, then it's fun. It's fun to do things that feel good in the body. And it's a wholesome way to feel good in your body, as opposed to, say, consuming some kind of intoxicant, for example, which, is fine if you do that, but it's maybe less wholesome than meditating, right? There are side effects when we take a drink or smoke something or something like that. Consequences that we may not want, even if we do want to feel good in our body. But basically, when you meditate, it's all good. As Shinzen says, if we get to the point where it feels good when we meditate, then it just feels good, and there's no, hangovers, or doesn't cost any money, things like that. It just feels good. You just sit there and it feels good. It's great. Changes the world for us, in fact, when we realize that it's possible to feel good just from sitting there and not doing too much. Totally changes your experience of what it's like to be alive. If you know at any time you can just feel good in your body just by sitting there, being still for a little while. But it takes time to get there, and that's a journey. So that may not be your experience just yet. As I say, it took me a few years to start feeling good when I meditate. So what do we do until then? Well, I'd suggest a couple of clues. One is that we want to help our body to feel good. Doing things like having good posture, for example, which is not just being upright, but also being relaxed, allowing any muscular tension that's present to dissipate and relax. If we're tight or bent over, it's not going to feel good, but if we're upright and relaxed, it will start to feel. But another angle that we want is the mind. This is why I had us check earlier. Was our mind tending towards thinking or towards quiet? If our mind is thinking, then there are a lot of tools that we might use to work with that. The mind can, over time, become quiet in the same way that the body can, with time, learn to feel good when we meditate. We might not be there yet. When we meditate, it might just be jabber, jabber, jabber. I like this guy, I don't like this guy. I like meditating, I don't like meditating. I'm thinking about the thing that's going to happen tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. It can be like that for years, but the mind can, over time, quiet down in the same way that over time, the body can learn to feel good when we practice. And as far as I can tell, these things go hand in hand. If our body feels good, then the mind quiets. If the mind is quiet, then the body feels good. They seem to go together. And we want to help our body-mind complex to go in that direction over time. So I'd suggest that there are sort of, one way to look at practice is having two gears, shall we say. One is the first gear, which most of us will be in today. Most of us will be in maybe for years, which is totally fine. It's totally fine. The first gear is when the body is uncomfortable or the mind is loud, or both. If that happens, no problem. You're not doing it wrong. Very normal, very normal. But the way that you want to meditate when the body is uncomfortable and when the mind is loud might be different than the other case where the body feels good and the mind is quiet. When you're in that state, which is quite fortunate to have the body feeling good and the mind being quiet, then doing an exercise like following the breathing not only makes sense, but it's sort of possible. There are many, of course, many traditional practices. Following the breath is a great one. It's my own main practice, but there are many. But these sort of traditional techniques, things like following the breath or doing a body scan, they make sense if the body feels good and the mind is quiet. But if that's not where we are, we want to work skillfully with what's there, whether it's the body being uncomfortable, in which case we want to help it relax and ease up, or the mind being loud, in which case we want to work with that skillfully, maybe even turning towards the content of what we're thinking about, or addressing problems in our lives, or just finding other ways to work with it. There are a lot of strategies in this gear. So the two gears are sort of the mind is distracted or we don't feel so good, and then there's focus. We feel good in our bodies and the mind is relatively quiet. In that second gear, we might do a traditional meditation technique like following the breath. And then in the first gear, which most of us will be in, and typically we are at the beginnings of our sessions, you can use any number of techniques to work with that, but you want to work with that skillfully, acknowledging that this is where I'm at right now. So for our practice today, we'll be working with these two gears. We'll have two different sections to the meditation. The first will be in this first gear. We'll start out saying, yeah, probably my mind is a little distracted. Probably my body doesn't feel so good. There's tensions to work out, things like that. So we'll work with that. And then we'll shift into the second gear and return to focusing on the breathing from that perspective, hoping that our bodies relax and the minds quiet down a little bit. But you can, of course, switch between these gears at any time. Maybe you're just needing to be in the first gear the whole time, no problem. Very normal, happens to all of us. Might be there for no problem. Or maybe today you're especially focused. You're really focused. It's easy to stay with the breath. You can go straight to that. You can skip the first section, go on to the advanced course, very complicated technique of following the breath. You can go right there. It's no problem. Probably different people will be at different places at different times. Feel free to adapt appropriately for you. So I hope all that makes sense and is helpful. We'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about that towards the end, but for now we'll have about 40 or 45 minutes of practice and then some discussion at the end. There'll be a brief stretch in the middle, but we'll do about 20 minutes of practice now, take a stretch, and then come back for 20 more minutes of practice and then some discussion. Once again, begin by straightening up, allowing your spine to become upright and erect, and by settling in, allowing the body to relax, letting go of any muscular tension that might be present at this time. And notice how your body feels. Maybe it's comfortable, maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's a mixture of these things, comfortable here, uncomfortable there. In any case, attune to how your body feels right now. Continue throughout this session to have awareness of your body in the background. And in particular, if at any time you notice that you're becoming tight, that there's tension in your muscles, hold the intention to relax if and when muscular tension arises. At any time that you notice muscular tension allow that to relax. And from here, with an upright, relaxed body, we're going to be working with this first gear. In particular, we're going to be working with the mind. In this particular strategy, we'll be using the mind to quiet the mind. Rather than allowing the mind to go from here to there, talk about this and to talk about that, we're going to intentionally use mental talk to talk in our minds. In particular, we're going to be narrating what it's like to be us right now. So you can imagine, for example, speaking to someone, perhaps me or a friend or someone else. And you can, in your mind, describe what it's like to be you right now. Use mental talk to narrate to someone in your mind what it's like to be you. So that might sound something like this. I notice my hair is itchy. And there's a tension in the top right portion of my back. Feeling a little nervous. The lights are bright. I can hear my stomach growling. My hair is itchy still, but in a different place than it was before. Use your mind to narrate your experience, describing in detail to a friend, someone you're imagining, what it's like to be you. It's often the case when we sit down to practice that our minds are active. There's a lot of talking. So we're going to make use of that tendency to stay with the experience of meditating. Describe from moment to moment what your experience is like, keeping a continuous stream of mental talk going, describing to someone you're imagining what it's like to be you right now. You can describe anything you like about your experience. Perhaps what your body feels like physically, what it's like for you emotionally right now, what the state of your mind is. You can describe whether you're enjoying this or not. You can describe what the room around you looks or sounds like. You can describe what thoughts are going through your mind. Anything at all about your experience is fine. In any case, use mental talk to narrate from moment to moment what it's like to be you. In a certain sense, not much is happening as we sit still quietly in a room. But from another perspective, quite a lot is happening. See if you can narrate or describe that. If you're describing from moment to moment what your experience is like using mental talk, then you're staying with the technique. If the mental talk dissipates or fades, simply acknowledge that and return to describing your experience from moment to moment. In a moment, I'll ring the bell and we'll take a 3-minute stretch break. But continue to be curious about your experience, noticing what it's like for you to be you. Once again, return to an upright, relaxed posture. We're going to shift gears. Bring awareness to your breathing at the abdomen, feeling the sensations associated with breathing in the abdominal area. And although we're not intentionally engaging the mind in the same way that we were a few moments ago, see if you can maintain the same kind of attunement to and curiosity about your experience. You can allow your focus to settle on the sensations of breathing from moment to moment, while still being aware of the rest of your experience. Noticing what your physical body feels like. Noticing whether any emotions are present. Noticing the quality of your mind. What the world and room around you are like. You can be aware of that even as you stay with the breath from moment to moment. See if you can balance these two things. Focus on the sensations of breathing and a broad awareness of your entire experience. at any time you become distracted, notice what distracted you. And as you return to the sensations of breathing, see if you can maintain a broad awareness of that aspect of your experience. For example, you noticed getting distracted by a particular kind of thinking about something in particular. See if you can follow the breath while being aware of your mind and the arising of that kind of thinking. It may not be easy to balance these two things. Focus on the breath and a broad awareness of your entire experience. But if you can access that, you may find that they're mutually supportive. That the broad awareness helps you to focus on the breath, and the focus on the breath helps you to maintain a broad awareness. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. We'll enter a discussion period. As we make that transition, see if you can maintain this broad awareness of what your experience is like. It's as if the focus will shift from your breath to the group and the conversation. The awareness will stay the same. As we enter the discussion period, see if you can connect to that broad awareness. So this is a time for connection and a community. If there are any questions or comments about the talk or the meditation, reports about your experience or anything like that, feel free to share that at this time.
Hey, I guess I'll share, or just a question really quick. Is just what you meant by a broad awareness. Like for me, the way I practiced the broad awareness was keeping my focus on my breath in the abdomen, but also in like a massage feeling in my head and feeling like it was going out into the room at the same time. And that was my version of a broad awareness, but I was wondering if you could speak to what you meant by broad awareness.
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I think that's a good way to do it too, to maintain awareness of the other parts of your body. And have you ever been in a room where you notice there's maybe something like a refrigerator or a heater, and then you notice all of a sudden that the heater goes off or the fridge goes off, and that it's been making a noise the whole time, but you just noticed that it stopped because the fridge went off or the heater or whatever it is, something like that. So it's kind of like that. In that situation where, say it's a fridge, right, and the fridge stops humming, then what happened was we were not aware of the fridge until it shifted. But so we suddenly become aware of the fridge because there's a really noticeable change that happens that sort of shakes us out of not being aware of the fridge, because it's sort of a static experience. When it's just humming in the background, we sort of ignore it, right? But you can actually have the opposite experience of that, where you're aware of the fridge humming the whole time, and then you do notice that it went off, but you were already aware of the fridge humming beforehand, right? And this is actually happening all of the time in our experience. Like, for example, right now, I'm sitting on a cushion, maybe you're on a chair or something like that, and we're connected to the ground, right? Where I can feel the ground underneath me, but because that's sort of continuous or stable, seems somewhat persistent, often the mind tends to filter that out and not notice that we're feeling the ground. Or I don't know, most of the room that I'm in right now is quiet except for where there are people. People are sort of moving slightly, but my mind has been filtering out that there's quiet over there in the room, and yet these things are happening all of the time. So there's this is sort of a way to just, rather than describe it directly, but I'll also answer your question a bit more directly, which is basically there are different aspects of our experience, our body, the world around us, our minds, and from moment to moment we can have some kind of connection to these things. And in fact, there's no limit to how big metaphorically this can be. So you can be aware of the state of your body, your emotions, what's happening in your mind, what's happening in the world around you, all at the same time. That can be very big. It can include a lot of things, and in fact, a tremendous amount of detail, right? The tendency of the mind is sort of to contract and not notice all of those things, but we can practice going against that tendency and allowing it to expand, to notice as much as possible. Again, our bodies, our emotions, the state of our minds, what we're thinking about, what the quality of our awareness is like, what's happening in the world around us, the temperature of the room, all kinds of details. We can just let that expand and expand and expand to encompass more and more and more. And that's challenging work. It might not be easy, but when we do that, things tend to go better. So I talked earlier about switching the focus space from the breath to this conversation, right? Right now, maybe you're listening to what I'm saying, or it's Jeff. Yeah, it's Jeff. Paying attention to Jeff and attuning to him and maybe his face, right? But you can also still be aware of all of these aspects of experience. And things tend to just go better when you do that, when you both focus on the thing that's in front of you, the actual conversation that you're having or what you're reading, or the fact that you're driving, or it may be, and maintain a really broad awareness. Things tend to just go better. I know earlier today I had a somewhat tense conversation with someone, and in that conversation, even though it was tense, I had a broad awareness, and I could be aware of the thoughts that were running through my mind, and be aware of the emotions that came up in my body, and be attuned to the other person's body language and the things that they were saying. Even as I paid attention to the conversation, I was staying with what we were talking about, but still aware of all of those things. And from that conversation went better than if my mind had sort of contracted on, say, the thoughts in my head or the feelings that arose in my body, for example. It just went better because my awareness was broad. So yeah, that's sort of, I hope that points to what I mean by awareness. There's a little bit of a, yeah, well, I probably could describe that a bit more precisely. In my experience, there's a bit of groping at the thing where you sort of figure out on your own what is being pointed to, and that's the most valuable thing, is to sort of encounter it for yourself so that you can maintain that broad awareness as big as possible, even as much as possible. Does that help answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, that expands a lot of, just makes me feel more creative now when I when I talk about it with my meditation friends. I really appreciate it a lot.
Great. Great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Tasshin. So nice to have you back. Always nice to have everybody, whoever shows up, but welcome. And thanks for what you're teaching today. It sort of along the lines of what Jeff was talking about, that sense of expansion so that there's spaciousness around everything else that's going on. And I had this really clear sense of the difference between the story my mind was telling and that my mind was telling a story. And I mean, there was almost a palpable sense of spaciousness around that. And I've been noticing this sort of like getting just sucked into the story and then coming back to the breath and then sucked into the story and coming. This kind of been a pattern over, the last little while, a few weeks maybe even. And this was just like, there we go. Now, so the story could happen, but then I could notice while the story was happening that the story was happening and be with my breath at the same time. So it was quite a revelation.
That's a wonderful report, Renee, and thank you for your welcome as well. I think that points to something quite important, which is I spoke earlier about whether paying attention to how the body feels, whether it feels good or not, and whether the mind is quiet or not. And ideally, you want to move towards the body feeling good and the mind being quiet. That's sort of the ideal state. Often we're in the opposite of that, where our body doesn't feel good and our mind is super loud. But first off, that's a spectrum with both of those things. The body can feel better or worse on a spectrum, and the mind can be more or less quiet. But actually, with respect to the mind, this quality that you're describing of having the story be active, but having some spaciousness around it, where you're kind of not getting sucked into it as much, it's still happening, is actually the more important thing than whether the mind is actually literally quiet or not. The mind can be super active and very loud, jabbering away, but you can still have this spaciousness where it's like, yep, it's like I'm in a room with a really annoying person that's just going on and on about the same thing over and over again. But you can be patient with that and have spaciousness and just allow that annoying voice in your mind to just keep me talking. And that's actually the more important thing than whether the mind is literally quiet or not. I mean, it's great if the mind just kind of is quiet for a little while. That's wonderful, but the more important thing is moving towards this spaciousness where you can allow the stories to arise and pass away without getting stuck on them. And there's actually something similar that happens in the body where, I don't know, when I sit these days, there's a lot of pleasant sensations, but there's also a lot of discomfort, and that's very common. There's both, but then you can have that same kind of spaciousness where you allow them to come and go without kind of getting fixated on the fact that there's pain or clinging on to the fact that there are pleasant sensations. You can just have that same kind of quality of spaciousness with it. Just, this is what it's like to have this body right now in this day as I sit in this posture. Yeah. So it's great that you were able to connect to that, and wonderful that you shared it with the group as well. Anything else that anyone would like to share?
Hi, I'd like to share a comment and a question. I think it was quite challenging today. I felt a lot of pain in my back, and I think I have this sort of belief that I should just patiently sit through the pain. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I tried that. And it was kind of interesting to see that when there was pain, there was this very clear, narrow focus. And then I would try to sit with it. And for a moment, it would feel good. And then I would notice it's feeling good now, and I would lose it and I would go back to pain. So I think it was maybe like a momentary experience of some form of release, but it wasn't very sustainable. Yeah, and I guess I just wonder what's your sort of experience with sitting through pain, and if there's any advice.
Right. Well, first, let me make sure I understand exactly what happened. So there's pain in your back, and you were tending towards wanting to sit with it, to sit through it. And you said there was a narrow focus when there was pain, and then you lost that when there wasn't pain. So does that mean that when there was not pain, you became distracted?
Interesting. I mean, I think that it's just that so I think that the pain was still there in some sense, but I wasn't noticing it for like a moment. And then I noticed it again. And I think that moment felt like a little bit out of body. And I associate that with the broader awareness, actually.
I see.
But
So
I'm not sure, yeah.
There was intense focus when there was pain, but then when there wasn't pain, your awareness broadened. And so when the pain was present, there was just the focus. But then when the pain wasn't present, you sort of lost the focus, but the awareness expanded.
I think so. At least that's my interpretation.
Great. Great. And then let's see. So there's 2 points. One is about the pain, and then one is about this balance between the focus and the awareness. And then get to the pain. So it's sort of like there's 2 different tools that you have. One is this narrow focus, and then one is this broad awareness. And ideally, you want to have both. You want to have awareness on something. Maybe it's the pain, maybe it's the breath, maybe it's this conversation right now, anything at all. You can focus on anything, and you want to have that broad awareness. But it's not easy to balance these. Challenging thing that I've asked you to do. So normal to have trouble, and typically when we have trouble with that, we have just one or the other. So we have just the focus or just the awareness, or neither. We don't have focus and we don't have awareness. That's a really interesting state, actually. But you want to steer towards having both, where you focus intensely on something, anything, not just the breath. It could be this conversation, for example, or what you're reading or whatever it may be, and have that broad awareness. That's what you're working towards. It's not easy, but you just know that's where you're going. As in terms of pain, pain can help with this because it's very easy to focus on pain, right? If the pain is present, then it's easy to focus on it, right? It might be hard to have a broad awareness, but it can be easy to focus on pain. It's such a prominent sensory experience. So that's convenient, it's helpful, but you don't have to focus on it. It's an option to focus on it, but it's also an option to not focus on it, in the same way that it's an option to sit up and sit through it, but it's also an option to say lie down or adjust your posture so that that pain doesn't come up. There are sort of advantages to each approach. As I say, one advantage of having the pain is it's pretty easy to focus on the pain, right? You notice that. That's helpful. Sometimes the breath, for example, can be hard to stay with, or some other focus space, but if we're having trouble focusing and there's pain, then that could be convenient, but that's convenient. That's all it is. You don't have to make use of that just because it is an advantage of there being pain in the body. It's your choice whether you'd like to have the pain or not. It's your choice whether you focus on it or not. And there's advantages and disadvantages to each approach. And there's no to be like, the best thing to do is to keep the pain there and to focus on it. You don't have to do that. there are advantages to that. There are also disadvantages to that, and it's really your choice. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd suggest one way to sort of choose practically whether to work with it or not is whether it's fun or not. Believe it or not, it can actually be fun to focus on pain or to have pain be there, especially because it can sort of have this effect of like purification, where it's like you're letting go of things that are sticking around that there. And that can be kind of fun. It's still painful. Don't get me wrong. There's still the pain there, but there can be a kind of fun to that. And if it's fun, then it's fun and you should focus on it. But if it's not fun, if it feels terrible, like you're punishing yourself or forcing yourself to do something, like it didn't sound fun to me when you're describing it. I'm not sure what your experience, but it didn't sound like you're like, oh man, I had this pain and it was so great. I got to focus on it and it felt weirdly good, even though it was still painful. That didn't sound like that's what you're reporting. So if it's not fun, I'd say, don't do it. You know, you're just punishing yourself then. I would go with whether it's fun or not. Great. Well, we probably have time for one quick comment or question.
May I just say something real quickly?
Mm-hmm.
It's very gratifying for me to feel the way I feel about you coming back. I just feel more a part of Oak because of how I feel. Like, oh, there's my friend from, what was it, the summer, or I don't even remember when. So I'd like to, like Renee did, tell you how happy I am to see you and everybody, but it just feels real good. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That makes meditating more fun. Really, it does, to have people like this group.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that, Pam. And I feel the same way being with you all today. It's really good to be with you. And I'd also mention, I think I mentioned this last summer as well, but you're always all welcome to email me. My email is tashin@monasticacademy.org. It's 2 S's, TASSHIN. And if you have any comments or questions, you like the talk, I could imagine someone didn't like the talk. I would love to hear that. Would love your feedback if that's you. Really welcome that, and would love to hear from you all. Feel free to drop me a line anytime. Great. Well, thanks for that, Pam, and thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to be with you and to share these teachings with you and to practice together. It's really wonderful in these times to have such a vibrant community. So thank you for being with us, and sending you lots of love from Oak.
Thanks, everyone. And Tasshin,
Take care, everyone.
thank you for bringing fun.
Oh, what a concept.
Be really weird fun for anyone outside of this group, but fun. Yeah.
Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good week.